Hi, and welcome to The Parent Equation with me, Aisha Murray. I'm a coach, and I primarily support working parents and carers who believe that parenthood shouldn't be a barrier to a successful and fulfilling career. In this podcast series, I chat to inspirational working parents and ask them to share their own experiences of raising children alongside their careers. We talk about the struggles and the moments of joy. And I hope in each episode there's something that can bring you a bit more strength and positivity. So please follow, listen and subscribe on all major platforms. Good morning and welcome to this episode of The Parent Equation. Today I'm joined by Richard Fairs. Richard is a dad of two boys, Lucas and Dexter, and a marketing professional who until recently had been at Shell for 17 years. I think that's right, Richard.
That's right, yeah.
Career at Shell, really, the whole career at Shell. He recently left, so at the moment is in homeschooling, I won't use the word hell, homeschooling challenge, as many of us are at the moment. So welcome, Richard, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, good to speak to you.
So I think let's just kick off with maybe a little bit about your background, I suppose, before and after having kids, because obviously, as I mentioned, you were at Shell for a very long time. So you actually had your kids at Shell, so to speak. So maybe talk us through that and maybe the differences between your perception of work before having them and then afterwards.
Yeah. So thanks for having me. So I was with Shell for 17 years. And then before that, 5 years before Shell. So I've not been with Shell all my career, but certainly most of my career has been with Shell. And my eldest is now 6, so I kind of had 11 years without kids, and then 6 years, the last 6 years with kids. I think probably the main difference is that you probably do get that sense of perspective that people, always talk to you about before you've had kids. I think having kids gives you a sense of what's important and maybe what's not as important as you thought it was before. So, and I definitely remember after having my first son, probably feeling a bit more relaxed about things and being a bit more clear-minded about what I needed to kind of stress over, I suppose. Yeah. I do think that, at least for me, it's not something that your life and your kind of mindset doesn't magically change. That before you were, you thought work was everything, and afterwards you've got everything, mentally where it needs to be. So, but there was definitely almost like a honeymoon period, I suppose, after having kids, where I could just kind of put things in the right boxes, so to speak, in my head, and make sure I was spending my energy on the things that were important.
Yeah. And then you had your second child there as well, I think, didn't you? So I suppose, like you said, the honeymoon period had probably passed by the time you had child 2, and you realised that actually life was still as it is, even when you have kids. So how did 2 kids change anything, if at all?
Well, I guess the most important thing with the second one is I actually took parental leave. So I took 3 months off, which was great. I took between Dexter, my youngest, being 3 months and 6 months old, off. And I think, between having the first and the second, the kind of parental leave rules changed. So I was able to take advantage of that the second time. Yeah. So that was really nice. And again, I think probably still a bit of a honeymoon period in terms of, resetting what is important and, obviously being really happy and loving having kids around and loving seeing the 2 kids together. Obviously, having 2 kids is very different to having one. It's much more difficult, I guess, and much busier, and quite a challenge. Yeah. But no, it was great. And again, I think you just kind of get used to it. It's quite difficult to kind of know how my kind of mindset towards work changed and when it changed. But I guess at a certain point, you just get back into the swing of things. And you probably, when the sleep gets a bit better, and you're not kind of walking around like a zombie, things kind of become a bit more how they used to be, I suppose.
Yeah. So let's just go back to the parental leave issue, because that's something I've talked about a lot on my podcast with fellow working dads like yourself.
Yeah.
And there is definitely, from what working fathers have told me, more of an uptake in fathers taking parental leave more recently. But there is still a bit of maybe stigma is not the right word, but fathers feeling that if they take too long off, even if they're entitled to that, they may miss out on opportunities at the workplace they have left temporarily. So you said you took 3 months off. How did you feel? So first of all, maybe tell me, how did you come to the decision that you wanted to take that time off, and the decision between you and your wife that you would take that time off? Yeah. And then how did you feel going back after that extended period?
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of, I mean, the way that it works is there's a year that can be split between the mum and the dad in whatever way you want to do it. Yeah. That's top level how it works. From memory, I think my wife had always planned to take 9 months off. So I don't think she'd ever planned for the year, which meant there was 3 months up for grabs, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to work at a company that offered, really good parental leave, had a good parental leave policy. So I was able to take those 3 months off and not kind of suffer too much financially, while still benefiting from the time off. So to be honest, it was a bit of a no-brainer in that sense. Yeah. And obviously I wanted to take the time off and spend some time with Dexter in his kind of formative years, formative months, should I say. And actually, I think 3 to 6 months is a lot more enjoyable than 0 to 3. They kind of babies are beginning to do things at that time. So yeah, that was kind of the logic. And then just to your point around missing out on opportunities, I mean, I think it's probably, it's easy to say once you've done it, but if somebody was to say that to me, I would kind of challenge that back, if you like, to say, well, yeah, you might miss out on opportunities at work, but the opportunity to spend 3 months quality time with your baby, you never have another opportunity like that. So, and I think probably there is a bit of still a bit of a stigma around, dads taking time off. But I think that's reducing. And I just think it's maybe not once in a lifetime, but certainly not something that you're going to get a lot of chance to do. And I definitely encourage anybody to do it.
And then you were obviously, during that 3 month period, you were taking him to baby classes or whatever, the park, etc. This is obviously well before pandemic times. How did you feel welcomed into those environments, being a father?
Yeah. So my wife was off at the same time. Okay. So for things like Sing and Sign, we tended to do it together. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, it was. I mean, you were typically the only or one of the very, very few blokes in the room. So I suppose it was a bit weird. And then, but even outside of parental leave, I was taking, even Lucas, my eldest, to things like Sing and Sign and Stay and Play. You feel welcomed. I think it's just one of those things where it's like any environment where if it's all women or it's all whatever and something different to that walks in the room, there's probably a little bit of a, people look up and go, okay, what's going on there?
What's his story?
Yeah, but so it's a little bit strange. And I guess, you're quite not sensitive, but you're aware that you're the only bloke there. But once you get into the nursery rhymes, you kind of begin to relax a little bit.
And I think there's also the representation maybe of stay-at-home dad, but also in your case, the sort of temporary parental leave dad. Things like Motherland on TV, where the only stay-at-home dad in that cast, the way they depict him isn't necessarily the most favourable to all other stay-at-home dads. And I think that's just something I still see quite a lot, which is quite unusual for the times we live in, to still be representing fathers being involved in their children in that way.
Yeah. No, I've watched a bit of Motherland. My wife really likes it. And I guess there still is a little bit of that. But I suppose, you can either get, maybe that's part of the reason, or a little part of the reason why people are reluctant to make the decision, if if you like, or take the opportunity of parental leave, or be a stay-at-home dad or whatever. But I think once you've done it, you've kind of just got to get on with it, haven't you? And if I'm honest, and again, we spoke just before the podcast about how my memory is appalling, and so is yours.
Yeah.
I can't really remember exactly how I felt, but I think the fact that you're spending this quality time and you're having such a great experience, I think you probably don't let those things bother you for too long, and I can as a kind of person, I can laugh at myself and don't take myself too seriously. So if I felt that somebody was thinking I was the motherland dad, or even made reference to it, and I'm actually now thinking about it, I'm pretty sure there have been a couple of references to that over the years. It wouldn't really bother me too much. And I think, you just got to get over that, really.
Yeah. And then we'll come on to homeschooling in a bit, but first of all, I just wanted to touch on your studying. So firstly, congratulations, because you've recently graduated from it's a mini marketing MBA with Mark Ritson, isn't it, I think? So that's from what I've seen on LinkedIn, outstanding results. So well done for that. How did it feel? How did you manage mentally and practically the time with having two young children and then having to take on quite a big studying project?
Yeah, so this was something that I did after. So I left Shell in August of this year.
Yeah.
And I knew that I wanted to. I knew that I wanted to do some studying. I knew that I wanted to just kind of get my brain working a little bit, and also this sounds really cheesy, but fall in love with marketing again.
Yeah.
And to just kind of go into that a little bit. As you said at the start, I spent 17 years with Shell. It's a fantastic company. I've had some great experiences there. I've done some great jobs and met some amazing people. But I also, and perhaps this is like any company that anybody would be in for that long, kind of felt myself going a little bit stale.
Yeah.
I felt like I wasn't waking up with the same kind of buzz as I used to, and the buzz that I would want to have going and doing something for 8 hours a day. That it's a big part of your life. So I knew that I kind of decided that after I left Shell, I wanted to go back and do some studying. Like I say, get my brain back into it, back into marketing. And I kind of looked around a few different things. So I looked at some, I guess, more academic courses. So I even looked at going back to uni. And the reason I chose the mini MBA with Mark Ritson, which is something that's done through Marketing Week, is, first of all, I think Mark Ritson's a great professor. And if there's loads of stuff on YouTube for people to go and check out. And he's this kind of balance of, he knows his stuff, obviously, and he's quite a classic marketing professor in that he's quite traditional, but he's very outspoken, and he's very direct, and he kind of swears a lot, not that that's necessarily, but he's quite human with it.
Yeah.
So I'd always enjoyed listening to him. And also it was a 12-week course, so it meant that versus other things, I didn't have to commit to like a couple of years. So I could do it in 12 weeks, and the standard of the course. So it's a mini MBA. So it's the MBA component. So it's the marketing component of an MBA.
Right.
So it doesn't do it. It's not got the breadth of an MBA. It doesn't cover all of the other things that people would do in an MBA, but it's a very high level from a marketing point of view.
Okay.
So that's why I chose that course. In terms of kind of being able to fit it in. I got lucky really that I left in August, and I think I started the course in September, and it went through to December, which was basically the only time in the last 12 months where we've not been fully locked down.
Yeah.
So the kids were at school. My eldest was at school, and my youngest was at nursery. They were doing shortened days, so I was able essentially to kind of drop them off at school, spend a day doing the work, doing the modules, doing the reading, then going back to pick them up at 3 and then spending time with them. So I was able to kind of squeeze it in, to be honest, pretty comfortably.
Yeah.
To do the work, do the reading. There was also quite a lot of talking with the other students, and I set up like a big kind of MS Teams community where I was able to kind of, have calls and things with the other students. And it worked pretty well, but got very lucky that I wasn't having to manage either work or homeschool.
Or homeschooling,
at the same time. That would have been more of a challenge.
Yeah. And that's what I noticed actually looking at your LinkedIn posts when you all graduated. I think because of you're my connections, that all these LinkedIn posts from all your alumni were popping up through my feed. And you could really see the network that you'd created within your fellow students was really strong and really supportive, which is great, especially in these times.
Yeah, no, that was amazing. So nobody knew anybody on this course. And there's kind of 11 modules, and then there's an exam, and the exam's like a case study, and you're given about a month to do that. Yeah. So it wasn't until the exam that I set this MS Teams area up. And again, I just, if I'm really honest, I had a little bit of time on my hands, and also I wanted to try and network. I wanted to try and meet people and talk to people. So I was able to kind of take the lead in that sense. So I set up this Teams area, and there was like 1,800 people on the course. I think eventually something like 250 odd people joined this MS Teams.
Oh, really?
I thought it was about 10.
Yeah.
And then, so there was kind of, chat and messages flying around on Teams, but also I set up weekly calls where about 30 or so people regularly went on those calls. So that was really the kind of real tight community, I guess. And I met some really, really great people on there. Really lovely people who also have, even after that, have, stayed in touch, but offered help and put me in touch with colleagues of theirs. So it's been really, really good. And that community part, the course was great, but the community part was the thing that I didn't expect to get out of it, I guess.
Yeah. And I think in these current times where we obviously can't see people face to face and form those connections as we used to, having a community like that is where you keep people connected and use that power of that network, especially for looking for work or things are happening in the workplace, which are quite unusual. As you said, it's a great benefit to something like that.
Yeah. It's weird. I think people are actually, I'm trying to kind of grasp some positives out of the pandemic. And I think one of them is that had we not had the pandemic, we probably wouldn't have, we wouldn't make those kind of virtual connections quite as easy. So I can now connect and build a relationship, admittedly kind of through a screen, but build a relationship with somebody that I've never met that might live in a totally different part of the country than me or even the world. Whereas actually without this, we'd have probably, I might have had a group with people in London, for instance, and we might have met somewhere and that would have been great. But I think, like I say, maybe clutching at straws, but perhaps it's given us an opportunity to kind
we have to try and find some positives out of this. And actually, I don't think you and I would be on this podcast together if it wasn't for the pandemic.
No, exactly.
I probably didn't mention, but we worked together briefly at Shell about 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And have since then obviously just been in contact through LinkedIn, etc. But then because of the podcast and that coming up because of lockdown, we've now got back in touch. So that probably wouldn't have happened pre-pandemic either.
We've got coronavirus to thank for this.
Yeah, exactly. For a lot of things, I'm sure. Like you said, clutching at straws, there must be something. So then you're now in the midst, as I touched on earlier, of homeschooling. And I think you've said to me before that you are able to commit more time to that in your current work scenario. So first of all, how are you finding it? Big question.
It's right. The really short answer is it's one of the most challenging things I've ever experienced. I think it's much better now, but still very challenging than back in March. But it's tough. It's really tough. So to kind of expand a little bit. So in the first lockdown, I mean, I'm sure we were like everybody else, right? So we found out that schools were closing down. So the first thing that you do is you write your timetable. 9 till 10, we're going to be doing this. 10 to 11, we're going to be doing this. 11 till 12, etc. We got the whole week mapped out. It's up on our fridge. We got it sorted, and obviously none of that happened at all. So I think we kind of learned through the first lockdown that A, it's not that easy. B, I think that kids just generally the role of a parent and the role of a teacher is fundamentally different. And kids, I mean, I'm sure of all ages, but my age, they have to be taught. They're not they can't self-teach at the moment. So they do rely on, one of us being right next to them all the time.
Yeah.
And, kids don't want to be taught by their parents.
No.
So first of all, the role of a teacher is difficult. Second of all, that the role of the teacher can't be done by a parent. And then I think the third thing is, we had some really, really stressful, tense moments in the, first couple of months. And I think, the lesson there is that just doesn't help anybody.
No.
And we, again, I can't quite remember the sequence of this, but there was the moment where we were just like, look, this isn't working. We just need to do what we can, get them to do what they can, and just try and enjoy it, or try and just, certainly don't sacrifice the kind of relationship or the, the enjoyment that the kids have with life and with being around us, for just trying to get them to do a bit of maths and a bit of phonics. So yeah, there was definitely a moment where the kind of timetable went out the window, and we got a bit more realistic about what we wanted to do. I think obviously when it's warmer, it was great because we could kind of go out in the garden, in the parks and stuff, and you could break it up. So that was kind of the first bit, and then the second bit. I mean, so it's slightly different this time because I guess we've got that experience under our belt. Also, our youngest is at nursery, so whereas everything was locked down the first time, our youngest is at nursery, and that makes a big difference to kind of my ability to focus on Lucas, our 6-year-old. There was a week or two when the nursery actually closed, and if I'm honest, I might sound like a bad daddy, but because I have to spend so much time supporting Lucas, and that's the priority because he's in school, he's actually learning things, and you don't want him to fall behind, etc. Dexter essentially was kind of go and sit upstairs with your tablet or watch some kind of number blocks on TV and save an hour or two. So there was a bit of kind of guilt there, but he's now back at nursery. So yeah, it's tough, but we're a bit more realistic about what you can do, and I think also it's quite. You do see his progress. Weirdly, in this last lockdown, you kind of see his progress. You see that he's developing. You see that he's getting better, and that's obviously great. And also, the other thing that I have found a little bit difficult, I suppose, for want of a better word, is that you have no idea what goes on in the school. I have no idea what goes on in the school.
No,
so
same.
Even kind of prior to lockdown, like I don't know how much, like what he's being taught, how he's being taught, how much attention is he paying. So you don't actually know whether what you're doing at home is less than, equal to, more than he would be when he's at school. So it's quite tricky to kind of know, to know how you're doing. And I guess ultimately you just got to do your best. And again, just keep pushing and keep hoping that he progresses, but also don't turn it into a horrible experience for everybody.
Definitely. And if you have a 10-year-old who was a bit more savvy, then they tell you that actually when they're actually at school, they have hours of breaks, apparently, hours and hours of breaks, and they're allowed about 25 snacks a day, which I didn't think was the case.
No, well, like you say, they sound pretty savvy. I like that. But I also do get a bit envious of people who've got older kids. So I speak to, my sister's got slightly older kids, and she's just like, she just sits in a room and she has lessons all day. It's pretty much the same. So I think the pandemic has been difficult for everybody, adults and kids, irrespective of the age. But I think the challenges have been difficult or different. Sorry. So I think again, trying to kind of pull positives out of the situation. I feel like having a 4 and a 6-year-old that probably don't really get it as much as, for instance, 11-year-olds or teenagers, or even like, 19, 18, 20-year-olds that want to be going out.
Yeah.
Their experience of this has been, it's probably not been as bad, I don't think, as the older kids. I think the older kids maybe psychologically will have been more affected by this. But yeah, from a homeschooling point of view, it's much more of a nightmare, I think, when you've got a 6-year-old than a 12-year-old.
And I think you're right. I think the younger kids, because I've got a 10-year-old, almost 11 and almost 6, I think the younger kids, as long as they're supported by their parents and they're fed and they're played with and they have the basic needs met, they can kind of get on with it, I think. They're pretty resilient. Also, they're not as conscious of, as you said, of what's going on around them out on the outside world. Whereas you get to definitely, I suppose, the teenage years, and especially with the awful things about the exams and GCSEs not happening, A-levels, etc. It's a whole nother level of pain being put on those kids.
But also, I mean, absolutely right, and agree about the exams. But I also feel like I kind of think back to when I was 17, 18, even a little bit older. You wanted to go out and see people. That was much more important, really, than work or schoolwork. And so I kind of feel like them being robbed of those 1 or 2 years, where that's where you go out and you party and you do things that perhaps you shouldn't do. Do you know what I mean? I feel sorry for those guys that are having to sit inside and, I don't know, maybe, at least they've got their Xboxes or whatever they do nowadays. But I feel sorry for kids that age.
Yeah, and I spoke to a few weeks ago. I spoke to my podcast guest was John Adams, and he talked about this generation of children, and I think especially for us, the younger ones, age 6 or so, who are suddenly being immersed in the digital world and, speeding around on the laptops, on Teams, going out of meetings, submitting work online, and something they wouldn't have normally been exposed to had this pandemic not happened. So these kids, especially the younger ones who've never had to do it before, are going to grow up with a completely different view on tech, on what the 9 to 5 means, what working from home means, all these kind of things. So it's going to be very interesting to see how their lives can have this manifest themselves later in life for them.
Yeah, and I guess the kind of 9 to 5 and the going into the office Monday to Friday, I bet on that never coming back in a structured way as it has been in the past. So they'll probably never experience what we've experienced for the last however many years. No, and they've seen us not going into work as well. They've seen that change in their parents' routines, and everyone being online, having Teams meetings and that kind of thing in the same space. So it's going to be interesting when it does go back to normal, how they perceive technology, as the role of technology in their lives as they grow older. Yeah, very interesting to track that. If you're a child psychologist, and saw someone's doing a study on that at the moment. So you said, I think earlier to me as well, that your wife is full-time working, so she's sort of up in the office working a full-time job. How do you two find, I suppose you are in the same house as we all are, but how do you find quality time for yourselves within a pandemic situation, lockdown situation, when you have kids, when you have homeschooling, when you have work to do? Do you find that easy to do? And if so, any tips for anybody listening out there who might be struggling with the same thing? No, I don't find it easy to do. I've probably got, probably it's easier said than done, I would say. So Tash, my wife, she's a solicitor, and she's very busy with work and got a lot to do. So we kind of decided, and this was part of probably only a small part, but part of the reason that I chose to leave Shell as well, was that us both doing a job, a proper job, if you like, wasn't going to work with us having to look after the kids as well. So I had an opportunity to leave Shell, so I chose to do that, and that meant that Tash was able to kind of focus more on her job and getting that done. And I want to give her a dues, because she does. So I do the majority of homeschooling, but again, mainly to keep our sanity. We've got kind of blocks where she will come out of work and kind of do an hour just to break up the day. And also she doesn't work Friday, so she has them on Friday. So Fridays are my favourite day. Can do other stuff. So I get to do Monday to Thursday, and then Friday is a bit more sane. But yeah, in terms of quality time, I think it's really tricky. I think again, you're kind of always looking for when this is going to end. So, and I think what we've done well, and I guess what most parents have done well, is really kind of formed a good partnership and a good team for the year or whatever, getting on for a year that we've had. But again, you've kind of got to, you can't only be a team. Your job can't only be looking after the kids. You've got to spend time with each other and, have quality time as husband and wife. And I think that's really, really difficult. So my advice would be to try and make that time. And even if it's, things like having a meal together on your own and cooking for each other without the kids, and just trying to break the routine up a little bit. We did, when we didn't have the lockdown, manage to get ourselves out to a restaurant. I think it's the only time we've been in a year.
Feels like another lifetime, that, isn't it?
I know, yeah. And just spending time without the kids, is important for your relationship.
Yeah.
It's difficult. So I live in London. It's difficult here because we don't really have family around, but we do have a couple of friends and godparents of my kids that will look after the kids for an hour or two or whatever we need them to, so that we can do that. But I think it's about making sure that you commit the time to doing that, and just making sure that you are spending time with each other, and you are essentially making sure that your relationship is still all right. But like I said, I think it's easier said than done, and I can't say that we've managed to do that as much as perhaps we would have liked to have done.
But having the intention and the commitment there is a start, isn't it?
And having each other's backs, and just recognizing when people are having a bad day, a good day, looking after them, little things as well, just little things, letting somebody have a lie-in, for instance, making them breakfast, just tiny, relatively kind of inconsequential things, but so that they know that you're, thinking of them, and you're working as a team. Really.
Yeah, but it's those small acts that make a big difference. It doesn't have to be some massive flamboyant thing, does it? It's just like you said, the small things that just ease the burden a little bit now and again. Yeah. So thank you. I think we've probably come to the end of our time, Richard. Thank you so much. It's been great to talk to you today. And if anybody wants to, I'm glad, good. If anyone wants to get hold of you, then what's the best way? Where can they find you?
Probably the best way is on LinkedIn. So you can search for Richard Fares on LinkedIn and you'll find me. That's the best thing.
Perfect. Great. Well, thank you so much. Have a good day. I hope the homeschooling isn't too bad today. And you're looking forward to Friday.
I am doing. We've got phonics out the way already today, so we're doing okay.
We're doing okay. You're on track. The timetable's working. All right. Thank you so much, Richard. Have a good day. Take care.
Yeah, great to speak to you. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Richard's down-to-earth, optimistic attitude is infectious and refreshing. Taking life in his stride, he saw the opportunities that the pandemic presented and used them to improve himself through study and also to take advantage of precious time with his 2 sons, plus homeschooling, of course. If you like this episode, please follow and share, and see you next time.